In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addresses our anxiety about basic needs. Do not be worried about the food and drink you need in order to stay alive, or about clothes for your body. But how is that possible? Matthew 6:26-32 then describes God's plan to provide for us just like He does for the birds and flowers. But what is our part in that plan? Jesus commands, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." We know from the preceding context that all these things doesn't refer to everything you might want. It only refers to your basic needs, things to eat, to drink, and to wear. But what does it mean, to seek first the kingdom and His righteousness?
It has been assumed that seeking the kingdom first is each individual's pursuit of intimacy with God. Therefore we should practice spiritual disciplines so that God will meet all our needs. But that doesn't work. Many people have both loved Jesus and struggled in dire poverty.
So what have we misunderstood? The answer lies in how we define His righteousness.
Righteousness occurs 7 times in Matthew, only once in Luke, and never in Mark's Gospel. It's Matthew's defining characteristic of God's kingdom. In Matthew 25, Jesus describes how a king, who represents God, decides whether you are righteous, if you feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, care for strangers, and visit the sick and imprisoned. The king's judgment reveals that righteousness is radically providing for people who are struggling to survive. Therefore, seeking to establish a kingdom defined by righteousness, means we become the human channels of divine care that provide what people need. That idea wasn't new. God had promised in Deuteronomy 15 that He had the solution to poverty for His people. Not one of your people will be poor if you obey and carefully observe everything that I command you today. But how can that be true? Deuteronomy 15:11 has the answer. There will always be some Israelites who are poor and in need, and so I command you to be generous to them. People will always fall into poverty, but God's people will keep pulling them out. Because God's people have always been God's way of delivering God's resources to those who are in need. So Matthew 6:33 doesn't promise that groceries will magically appear in our pantries if we are spiritual enough, by studying the Bible, and praying a lot. Jesus is simply telling us to form a compassionate community that shares with people in need. And the more we arrive at the righteousness Jesus told us to seek, the less we have to worry about what we might need in a crisis. We can rest confidently knowing that God's people in God's kingdom will take care of us. And that is a kingdom worth building for everyone.